It was never meant to be seen, hidden behind layers of protocol, sealed beneath decades of royal silence. The document sat untouched until one quiet audit forced open a cabinet that should have remained closed forever. What Princess Anne found inside was not just paper and ink. It was a royal earthquake, a decree powerful enough to bypass a king. And when she read the name at the bottom, everything changed. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The audit itself was routine, almost mundane, initiated under Princess Anne's watch as guardian of royal estate oversight. She had built a reputation on discipline, precision, and loyalty to the institution above personal comfort. Nothing slipped past her. Nothing lingered unexamined. That was the unspoken rule she lived by. But buried within archival files tied to private estate restructuring was a sealed envelope bearing markings that predated the final months of Queen Elizabeth's strategic planning. It was not stamped for public record. It was not catalogued in official summaries, yet it carried authentication codes no one could dispute. The moment Anne unfolded the pages, she sensed the weight of something far greater than administrative oversight. The language was deliberate, formal, unmistakably royal in tone. It spoke of continuity, stability, preservation of sovereign authority. And then came the line that shifted the air around her. Direct succession of properties to Prince George. She did not misread it. She checked again and again. The phrasing was careful but clear. Estates traditionally flowing through the reigning monarch were to bypass the Charles generation entirely. No temporary stewardship, no intermediary control. The transfer, upon activation, would move directly to George. It was not symbolic. It was structural. It altered the financial bloodstream of the monarchy itself. Anne's pulse did not race outwardly, but internally the tremor began. Because this was not about ceremony or titles. It was about land, about wealth accumulated across centuries, about leverage and influence that shape the quiet mechanics of power. A subtle clause reinforced what her instincts already feared. The Charles generation was legally bypassed in estate transfer, not delayed, not shared. Bypassed. The word did not appear bluntly, but the meaning echoed through every carefully constructed sentence. For a sister, that realization cut deep. For a protector of the crown, it felt like a calculated safeguard, and therein lay her torment. Was this an act of maternal doubt from Queen Elizabeth, or a strategic maneuver to insulate the monarchy from future instability? Anne understood better than most that royal affection and royal necessity rarely align cleanly. The crown demands sacrifice, but this felt surgical. She leaned back and allowed the implications to settle. If these estates moved directly to George, Charles would reign publicly while key assets quietly shifted beyond his control. A king crowned, yet financially restrained, that imbalance could reshape influence within palace walls. And one more thought crept in, colder than the rest. Documents like this do not draft themselves. Someone advised it, someone witnessed it, someone knew. And if Anne had only just uncovered it during an audit, then who had ensured it remained hidden until now? Her loyalty to her brother battled her loyalty to institutional stability. She could seal it back away, pretend the audit revealed nothing, or she could confront a truth that would fracture assumptions at the highest level of the monarchy. The Queen had not left chaos. She had left intention, and intentions, once revealed, demand reckoning. But as Anne reread the decree for the third time, a far more dangerous question emerged. Who authorized it, and why was it hidden from Charles in the first place? For decades, she smiled publicly, but privately, she calculated. Queen Elizabeth never moved without purpose. And according to insiders, now whispering behind palace walls, this decree wasn't an accident. It was a strategy, a final safeguard designed to protect the monarchy from future instability. But what threat was she preparing for? And why would that protection require skipping her own son? Princess Anne understood something in that moment that few ever truly grasp about her mother. Every silence carried intention, every delay concealed design. The Queen had survived wars of reputation, political turbulence, and generational shifts that nearly fractured the institution. She did not improvise when it came to survival. She engineered it, Those who served closest to her often spoke of quiet evenings filled not with sentiment, but with careful consultations, legal advisors summoned discreetly. Estate continuity mapped years, even decades ahead. The crown, to Elizabeth, was not an inheritance. It was a responsibility that had to outlive personalities, tempers, and public moods. Rumours now threading through palace corridors suggest that the decree Anne discovered may have originated during a period of deep reflection within the Queen's final years, a time when public trust wavered, when modern monarchy optics shifted under relentless scrutiny. The Queen had always understood that perception is power. She had witnessed how rapidly affection could transform into skepticism, and somewhere within that awareness, she appears to have confronted a difficult truth. Continuity could no longer rely solely on tradition. It had to anticipate turbulence. The decree's phrasing, particularly the reference to uninterrupted sovereign continuity, was not poetic. It was surgical. It implied foresight of potential disruption. The bypassing of Charles was not described as punishment or doubt. It was framed as insulation, a mechanism to ensure that, no matter what storms gathered around a reigning monarch, the financial and territorial foundation of the crown would pass seamlessly to the next stabilizing force. Youth, longevity, fresh legitimacy, Prince George embodied that future. But this was not a cold act. That is what makes it so unsettling. Elizabeth was both sovereign and mother, and those two identities rarely collided without consequence. To shield the monarchy may have meant wounding her son. To preserve generational strength may have required temporary fracture. The decree reflects that duality, loving in its intention to protect the family's long-term survival, ruthless in its willingness to skip a generation to do so. Anne now found herself replaying subtle memories, conversations half-finished, moments when her mother spoke about legacy, not as sentiment, but as structure. Was she quietly briefed years ago? Was she chosen as the silent custodian of a safeguard, meant to surface only if certain lines were crossed? The thought lingered like a shadow she could not quite grasp. Elizabeth trusted Anne's discretion above all. If anyone could carry a burden of this magnitude without theatrics, it was her. And yet, the deeper Anne examined the decree, the more evident it became that secrecy was intentional. This was not a document meant for ceremonial unveiling. It was contingency planning, activated only under defined circumstances, shielded from unnecessary exposure, and perhaps shielded from Charles himself. Because if this strategy truly was about protecting the monarchy from instability, then the implications are devastating. It suggests anticipation. It suggests preparation for something unspoken, and it suggests that the Queen, in her final acts of guardianship, made a choice that prioritized endurance over emotion. A choice that rewrote inheritance while preserving public calm. And if this was truly the Queen's safeguard, then the next revelation would strike even closer to home, because Charles was never meant to know. Imagine ascending the throne only to discover that your own inheritance was quietly redirected. No public scandal, no announcement. Just a silent rerouting of legacy. That is the storm now circling King Charles. Because this wasn't about ceremony, it was about land, estates, and private wealth, long believed to be secured. And now, with Anne holding the decree, Charles faces a truth he may never have anticipated. For a man who waited a lifetime to wear the crown, the revelation cuts deeper than any headline ever could. Kingship is not only symbolic, it is sustained by the quiet machinery of property, of estates that fund independence and influence. The decree Anne uncovered was not about palaces used for public duty. It referenced privately held royal estates lands, stewarded across generations, holdings that shape both prestige and power. These were assets Charles had long assumed would pass through him, to be modernized, refined, reshaped, according to his vision, for a sustainable and contemporary monarchy. He had spoken for years about environmental stewardship, about transforming estates into models of green innovation. He saw himself not merely as heir, but as reformer, and now that vision stands subtly undercut, because bypassing him is not merely procedural, it is personal. Financial autonomy grants a monarch freedom. Remove that control, and authority narrows. If the estates flow directly to George under specific conditions, Charles becomes a king in title, yet potentially restrained in long-term estate influence. That imbalance is not publicly visible. It does not weaken the throne ceremonially, but privately, it shifts leverage in ways few outsiders would ever understand. The emotional tension between him and Anne is said to be quiet, controlled, but unmistakable. Anne did not create the decree, yet she is its discoverer. She did not draft the bypass, yet she must present it. That dynamic alone breeds discomfort. Loyalty to a brother clashes with duty to transparency. Charles, composed as ever, may not raise his voice, but restrained fury often speaks louder than open anger. What lingers behind palace doors is not shouting. It is silence heavy enough to fracture trust. And beneath that silence lies an even more painful possibility. Did Elizabeth doubt his stewardship? Was this a calculated vote of confidence in a younger generation rather than in him? No monarch wishes to question a parent's faith, yet the decree implies foresight that excludes him from financial continuity. It does not accuse him, it does not criticize, but it anticipates something, an instability, a vulnerability, or perhaps simply a belief that the institution would be stronger if anchored sooner in youth. To be publicly crowned yet privately bypassed creates a psychological contradiction. Charles commands ceremony, respect, and constitutional authority, yet in the realm of inheritance planning, the foundation subtly shifts beneath him. Advisors within the palace have reportedly begun examining implications in hushed tones. Legal interpretations are reviewed carefully. Financial teams calculate scenarios. No one wants confrontation, but the temperature has changed. Even the most loyal courtiers understand that this decree introduces a recalibration of power. What makes this even more unsettling is the precision of the wording. There is no room for casual reinterpretation. The bypass is deliberate. It suggests contingency. It suggests anticipation of circumstances under which estate continuity must leap forward rather than flow sequentially. And Charles, who has spent decades preparing for responsible stewardship, must now confront the reality that preparation does not guarantee inheritance. In private moments, the weight of this discovery must feel isolating. A king crowned amid public celebration now grapples with a quieter reckoning, one that questions not his right to rule, but his place within the lineage of property and generational wealth. And while he wrestles with what this means for his authority, for his legacy, for his relationship with Anne, another truth grows louder within the decree's language. Because while Charles processes restraint, another name is elevated, another generation is empowered, and that shift carries consequences far beyond sibling tension. But while Charles wrestled with the implications, another name echoed louder in the decree: the future king, who may inherit everything far sooner than expected. He is still a boy, still learning, still growing, yet somewhere within royal archives, his name is written beside properties worth billions. Prince George did not ask for this acceleration of destiny, but the decree places him at the center of a generational leap, a leap that could redefine the monarchy before he even reaches adulthood. The symbolic weight of that reality is almost unbearable. To inherit directly from a great-grandmother who ruled for 70 years is not merely a transfer of assets. It is an anointing of trust. It sends a message that echoes beyond balance sheets and boundaries of land. It declares that the future of the crown is being anchored in youth, in longevity, in a line perceived as stable and steady. By bypassing Charles and positioning George as the direct recipient, the decree becomes more than a legal maneuver. It becomes a statement, a vote of confidence in the William and Catherine era. A quiet declaration that the monarchy's next chapter has already begun drafting itself. For Catherine, the implications would strike at a deeply personal level. A mother first, a future queen second. The knowledge that her son's name is tied to immense wealth and institutional power before he has even reached full maturity would awaken both pride and fear. Protection would become instinctive, not protection from ceremony but from scrutiny, from expectation, from those who might see in George not a child, but an opportunity. Consolidating wealth early carries consequences beyond prestige. It alters security calculations. It intensifies political sensitivities. It sharpens the gaze of critics who may question fairness, timing, or motive. And if the decree were ever to surface publicly, the narrative could fracture. Some would view it as visionary planning, others as a destabilizing bypass of tradition. The monarchy survives on perception as much as protocol. A generational leap of this magnitude could inspire confidence or ignite resentment. The optics alone are combustible, because when inheritance leaps forward, it leaves space behind. An empty space within royal hierarchy rarely remains silent, yet George himself remains unaware of the gravity written beside his name. That is perhaps the most haunting aspect of this shift. He embodies continuity in uncertain times. His presence reassures a public that craves steadiness. His youth symbolizes renewal, but beneath that symbolism lies a burden quietly forming. Expectations solidify long before adulthood arrives, and the decree ensures that his destiny will be shaped not only by ceremony, but by early stewardship of estates designed to sustain sovereign authority. The strategic bypass strengthens his position without granting him agency. It shields the monarchy's future, yet accelerates his path toward responsibility. And in doing so, it intensifies the emotional fault lines within the family. Because if George is elevated structurally, what does that signal to those positioned in between? What conversations unfold in private when generational confidence is made explicit? Whispers of sidelining do not fade easily. There are those who may interpret this move as consolidation of influence within one branch of the family, those who may feel overlooked. The decree does not name adversaries, yet it creates the conditions for tension. External pressure can build quietly, expectations can morph into rivalry, and while the monarchy outwardly projects unity, internal recalibrations of power rarely go unnoticed. George stands at the heart of a storm he did not summon, a child bearing the quiet endorsement of a late sovereign, a future king whose inheritance may arrive earlier, heavier, and more scrutinized than anyone predicted. And as his name solidified in ink, as the generational leap became undeniable, the weight of this revelation could no longer rest solely on Anne or Charles, because the focus now shifts to the figure uniquely positioned between a reigning king and an accelerated heir. The man who must navigate loyalty upward and protection downward. And as George's name solidified in ink, the question turned sharply toward the man standing between past and future, Prince William. Prince William now stands in a space few heirs ever occupy, a bridge between a reigning king and a rising child monarch. The decree does not crown him. It does not elevate him. Instead, it strengthens his son. And that subtle shift changes everything, because William must now balance loyalty to his father with protection of his son's unprecedented inheritance. For years, William has mastered the art of composure. He learned early that survival within the monarchy requires restraint, timing, and an almost surgical sense of diplomacy. But this revelation tests him in ways no public controversy ever could. The decree is not an attack on him. In fact, it indirectly empowers his line. Yet, empowerment of his son inevitably casts a shadow across his father. And that is where the emotional fault line deepens. William cannot celebrate what strengthens George without acknowledging what it silently removes from Charles. Behind closed conversations, his instinct would not be confrontation, but containment. William understands that the crown survives by appearing unshaken. He would approach Anne not with outrage, but with measured inquiry. What exactly triggers the decree? How firm is its enforcement? What room exists for reinterpretation? Those discussions would not be heated, they would be precise, because William knows that every word spoken inside those rooms may shape the monarchy's trajectory for decades. Catherine's influence in this moment would be steady and clear. She sees both the promise and the peril. The decree secures her son's future in ways no modern heir has experienced so early, but it also paints a target of expectation across his childhood. Catherine's counsel would likely focus on protection first, optics second. Shield George. Preserve normalcy where possible. Ensure that accelerated inheritance does not translate into accelerated exposure. Her perspective grounds William's reaction, not as a politician alone, but as a father. Yet the silence William maintains could be misread. From Charles's vantage point, quiet acceptance might feel like silent endorsement. A son who does not protest may appear to benefit, and that perception alone could plant seeds of suspicion. William must tread carefully, too vocal in defense of his father, and he undermines the decree's authority, too passive, and he risks appearing complicit in its bypass. Strategically, William would likely explore restructuring pathways. Could estates be administratively aligned in ways that preserve dignity for Charles, while honouring the decree's intent? Could stewardship roles be defined without publicly exposing the generational leap? These are not small adjustments, they are structural recalibrations. And William, ever aware of long-term stability, would prioritise solutions that prevent fracture rather than inflame it. Above all, he seeks unity. Public fracture is the monarchy's greatest vulnerability. William has witnessed firsthand how internal conflict, once visible, spirals beyond control. He understands media cycles, he understands perception, and he understands that even the hint of rivalry between king and heir can destabilize public confidence. His objective becomes simple but daunting: contain the impact, preserve respect, and protect his son's future without diminishing his father's reign. But there is another dimension William cannot ignore. Power redistributed does not go unnoticed. Those outside the immediate line of succession, those who already navigate the margins of influence, may interpret this decree as consolidation, as reinforcement of one branch over another. And when influence narrows, reactions widen. Resentment, once stirred, rarely remains dormant. William senses that the decree is not just a family matter, it is a structural shift. And structural shift ripple outward. The careful diplomacy he deploys now may prevent visible conflict, but it cannot erase the underlying tension. Because even if the inner circle remains disciplined, the outer layers of the monarchy will feel the tremor. And outside that carefully guarded inner circle, whispers began spreading because property in the monarchy is never just property. These are not mere houses. They are not mere houses. They are symbols of dominance, diplomacy, and generational authority. Estates tied to history, to ceremony, to the very identity of the British crown. To transfer them across a generation is not administrative, it is revolutionary. And as details leak, the magnitude of what Anne uncovered becomes clearer. This was a structural redesign of royal power. For centuries, ancestral estates have represented more than private comfort. They anchor influence. They sustain independence from shifting political winds. They embody continuity when governments change and public moods fluctuate. Land, in royal terms, is leverage. It is quiet strength wrapped in tradition. To redirect that strength away from the reigning monarch and toward a future heir is to redraw the invisible architecture of authority. This decree did not shuffle paperwork. It recalibrated the crown's center of gravity. The emotional symbolism alone is staggering. Estates passed from sovereign to sovereign are not simply inherited, they are entrusted. Each monarch leaves fingerprints of vision upon them. Charles has long spoken of environmental stewardship, of reshaping holdings into living examples of sustainability and modern relevance. Those estates were to be extensions of his philosophy. Now, their ultimate trajectory bends elsewhere. That shift does not erase his reign, but it reframes its reach. Influence, once assumed to mature fully in his hands, is partially rerouted. Financial autonomy is where symbolism becomes substance. Control of private estates strengthens a monarch's ability to act without dependency. It creates a financial backbone independent of parliamentary structures. If those resources consolidate under George's future authority, even conditionally, then the long-term independence of the monarchy subtly realigns. Charles governs today. George, through this decree, is fortified for tomorrow. The result is a bridge of power that bypasses the present and invests heavily in the next generation. This is not random generosity. It reads like insulation, a long-term political strategy designed to shield the crown from potential turbulence. By embedding financial continuity directly into a youthful successor, the decree ensures that even if controversy, illness, or instability disrupts the middle generation, the institutional foundation remains intact. It is protective, it is calculated, and it is bold. But insulation inevitably redistributes influence. Advisors, estate managers, and inner circle confidence long aligned with Charles, may find their authority gradually diluted. If stewardship timelines accelerate or conditional clauses activate earlier than expected, entire staffing structures could evolve. Roles would be redefined, loyalties tested. Quiet shifts in administrative control might occur long before any public announcement, and in a monarchy where hierarchy defines identity, even subtle redistribution feels seismic. Then there are the hidden clauses, phrases within the decree that suggest activation timelines, language implying the transfer becomes enforceable under specific circumstances. Not immediate, not automatic, but conditional. That detail transforms the decree from static inheritance into dynamic contingency planning. It was crafted to surface only if certain thresholds were crossed, which raises a chilling implication. Elizabeth anticipated scenarios in which this structural redesign would become necessary. Perhaps it was meant to remain buried unless triggered. Perhaps Anne's discovery arrived earlier than intended, or perhaps the very act of uncovering it is part of the safeguard's timing. The decree feels less like a simple bequest and more like a dormant mechanism awaiting alignment, a strategic pivot hidden beneath decades of calm. And when mechanisms shift power, even quietly, they provoke reaction. B. Cause estates do not exist in isolation. They sustain networks, they reinforce loyalties, they define influence. A generational leap in property is a generational leap in authority. And those positioned on the periphery of that authority do not ignore it. They calculate, they respond. The redesign may be visionary, it may be protective, but it is not neutral. Every safeguard draws a line between those strengthened and those sidelined. And in the monarchy's hushed corridors, lines once invisible are becoming clearer by the day. But every safeguard creates resistance, and resistance was already building in quiet corridors. Behind closed doors, voices were raised, not publicly, not dramatically, but firmly. Because the decree did more than rearrange inheritance, it disrupted hierarchy. Advisors questioned precedent, loyalties were tested. And in the center stood Princess Anne, accused by some of destabilizing the very institution she sought to protect. The debates began quietly, almost clinically. Senior legal minds gathered to dissect the language line by line, testing its enforceability, probing for ambiguity, searching for procedural gaps that might soften its impact. Could it be challenged? Was it binding under existing frameworks? Did activation depend on conditions yet unmet? These were not academic exercises, they were lifelines for those who felt the ground shifting beneath them. Every interpretation carried consequence. Every pause signaled uncertainty. And uncertainty is something the monarchy does not tolerate easily. Anne did not flinch. She refused to bury the document or delay its review. For her, concealment would have been betrayal not of Charles, but of the crown itself. She had sworn loyalty to continuity, not comfort. Yet that steadfastness came at a cost. Some whispered that by surfacing the decree she had ignited unnecessary turbulence. Others suggest she should have approached Charles privately, allowing time for strategy before wider consultation. But Anne's resolve was unwavering. If the Queen had intended this safeguard to endure, then it deserved acknowledgement, not suppression. The emotional tension between siblings intensified beneath the surface. Charles, dignified as ever, wrestled with a storm he could not publicly express. Pride urged resistance, pragmatism demanded composure. He understood that overt opposition might fracture unity, yet silent acceptance could appear as weakness. The decree did not challenge his reign directly, but it challenged assumptions he had carried for decades. The weight of that realization pressed inward. He had waited his entire life to lead. Now he faced the possibility that his leadership was structurally contained. William stepped into the role of mediator with careful precision. He listened more than he spoke. He absorbed tension without amplifying it. His objective was simple in theory, complex in practice: prevent rupture. He understood his father's pride. He understood his aunt's duty, and he understood that any visible divide would magnify beyond palace walls. Quiet conversations stretched long into evenings, searching for alignment without sacrificing integrity. It was diplomacy under emotional fire. Meanwhile, anxiety over media exposure tightened the atmosphere further. If news of the decree leaked prematurely, speculation would spiral uncontrollably. Narratives of betrayal, generational rivalry, or institutional instability would dominate headlines. The monarchy's carefully managed image could fracture overnight. Advisors urged discretion, containment strategies were drafted, but secrecy in a world of relentless scrutiny is fragile. The more people aware of the decree, the greater the risk of rupture. And then came the whispers that unsettled even the most compos, courtiers. Rumors that Anne had safeguarded a copy of the decree for years, that perhaps she had known of its existence long before this audit surfaced it officially. If true, that would transform her from discoverer to custodian. It would suggest premeditation, long-term guardianship of a contingency meant to activate at the right moment. Anne neither confirmed nor denied such speculation. Her silence only deepened the intrigue. Within these confrontations lay a deeper truth. This was not simply about property. It was about trust, about whether Elizabeth's final strategic move represented doubt or devotion, about whether protection justified bypassing tradition. Each participant in the conflict interpreted the decree through personal lenses, shaped by loyalty, ambition, and fear. The monarchy thrives on unity, yet unity forged under strain reveals hidden fractures. And just when it seemed the debate could go no further, when positions hardened and emotions steadied into guarded resolve, Anne revisited the document one more time. She scanned its final lines, not for reassurance, but for clarity. What she found there would eclipse every argument that came before it, because buried beneath the enforceability debates, beneath sibling tension and whispered accusations, lay something far more destabilizing. Yet the greatest shock was not the conflict, it was the final clause Anne had almost overlooked. Buried at the bottom, beneath legal phrasing and formal structure, sat a clause so explosive it reframed the entire narrative. This decree was not merely a transfer, it was conditional, activated under specific circumstances tied to the monarchy's stability. And that meant something far more unsettling. Someone anticipated crisis. The language was subtle but unmistakable. The estates would pass directly to George not simply by time or tradition, but upon the occurrence of death. Institutional vulnerabilities. The document did not list dramatic catastrophes. It did not predict scandal or collapse. Instead, it referred to circumstances materially affecting sovereign continuity. That phrase alone changed everything. It implied foresight of disruption. It implied that Elizabeth had considered the possibility of fragility within her own lineage and had designed a safeguard strong enough to bypass sentiment. Anne felt the weight of that realization settle like stone. This was no impulsive adjustment made in the twilight of a reign. It was deliberate contingency architecture. The timeline implications were staggering. If certain thresholds were met, be they constitutional strain, public confidence erosion, or governance instability, the transfer mechanism could accelerate. That meant the decree was not passive. It was dormant power waiting for activation. Who, then, could trigger enforcement? The clause suggested a limited circle of institutional guardians, legal authorities bound by confidentiality, perhaps even Anne herself. The specificity narrowed interpretation. It prevented arbitrary action, while ensuring that if genuine instability emerged, the estates would leap forward into George's future without hesitation. That balance between restraint and readiness revealed a deeper layer of planning than anyone had anticipated. For Charles, this was the moment when emotional discomfort transformed into institutional reckoning. The clause did not accuse him. It did not suggest personal failure, but it placed the monarchy's survival above generational sequence. In doing so, it forced him to confront a stark truth. The crown operates on preservation, not preference. If stability faltered under his reign, mechanisms existed to secure continuity beyond him. That is not an insult, it is a safeguard. Yet knowing it exists reshapes perception forever. Anne understood now why the decree felt heavier than a simple inheritance adjustment. It was insurance, and insurance is only drafted when risk is imagined. Her mother had not left chaos, she had left preparatio. The foresight embedded in that clause spoke of sleepless nights and difficult calculations. Elizabeth had weighed maternal love against institutional duty, and chosen endurance, that choice reverberates painfully in the present. And then there is George, his future secured, insulated, protected by design. But security carries cost. The knowledge that his inheritance is contingent upon instability creates an invisible burden. It ties his ascension of property to moments of vulnerability. His strengthened position is born not of celebration, but of contingency. That paradox may never reach him directly, yet it shapes the environment he will inherit. The decree now stands revealed not as a quiet bypass, but as a strategic pivot, engineered to withstand storms. It anticipates fracture while striving to prevent collapse. It places trust in youth without stripping authority from experience, unless stability demands it. That nuance is what makes it so powerful and so dangerous, because once a contingency is known, it alters behavior. Advisors recalibrate. Family dynamics shift. Every action now unfolds under the shadow of a clause that could redefine the monarchy's trajectory in a moment of strain. And as the dust begins to settle, one truth remains: this discovery may redefine not just inheritance, but the very future of the crown. History rarely shouts. It shifts quietly through ink, through signatures, through decisions made long before their consequences unfold. Princess Anne's discovery is more than a secret decree. It is a generational pivot, a recalibration of trust, a silent reshaping of power. And the ripple effects may not be felt fully until Prince George ascends to claim what was secured for him decades earlier. What began as a routine audit has unfolded into a profound meditation on legacy and sacrifice. At its core, this decree forces a painful contrast between preservation and personal hurt. Queen Elizabeth's final safeguard was not designed to wound, yet it inevitably does. By insulating the crown's future, she risked bruising the present. That tension is the essence of monarchy itself: duty outweighing comfort, continuity outweighing emotion. Anne, now standing as the reluctant guardian of this revelation, carries that burden with quiet resolve. She did not author the decree, but she protects its integrity. In doing so, she preserves the architecture her mother constructed, even as it unsettles those she loves. Charles, for his part, embodies dignity amid disappointment. His reign proceeds with ceremony and composure, yet beneath the formalities lies an awareness that succession planning moved around him, not through him. That knowledge reshapes identity. It demands humility in the face of institutional reality. And still, he endures, because kingship, like legacy, is larger than personal pride. His challenge is not to erase the decree, but to lead in its shadow without allowing it to fracture unity. William's role becomes even more intricate. He prepares his son not merely for symbolic inheritance, but for responsibility that may arrive sooner and heavier than tradition once dictated. The path ahead is no longer linear. It is layered. William must cultivate strength in George, while shielding him from the emotional undercurrents that shaped this structural leap. Catherine's steady influence ensures that childhood remains intact, even as destiny accelerates quietly beneath the surface. The crown itself evolves without spectacle. No public address announces this pivot. No banners declare the shift. Instead, power rebalances in silence. That is how enduring institutions adapt subtly, strategically, without inviting chaos. And yet one question lingers, haunting and unresolved. What did Elizabeth truly fear? What instability dying did she imagine that warranted such decisive insulation? Was it generational vulnerability, public trust erosion, or simply the unpredictable nature of modern monarchy? That mystery may never be fully answered. It remains embedded in the clause, in the timing, in the careful concealment. In the end, this story is not about land alone. It is about loyalty tested by structure, about sacrifice masked as strategy, about love expressed through difficult decisions. Anne safeguards continuity, Charles absorbs quiet restraint, William bridges errors, and George, unaware of the storm beneath his name, stands as the embodiment of a future secured long before he could comprehend it. Because in the monarchy, the most powerful revolutions are the ones written in silence, and only discovered when the next generation is ready to rise. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.